For our Motorsports, we'll expand to a 3-car team in 2025, and Carl Edwards will not return to NASCAR. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just show them those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a couple paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Josh Bilicki's 2024 Tech Trim Tech scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Portland in his first start with JGR. The scheme looks really good in my opinion. Love the yellow, love the black, love the red. Everything about this looks really awesome. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack tomorrow afternoon at Portland. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Derek Krause's 2024 Kafka conveyor scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Gateway. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. I think there's been some good call schemes, some not so good ones, but I think this one looks alright in my opinion. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Gateway. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Michael McDowell's 2024 Sidemen Cancer Center scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Gateway. I like the blue, love the colors of it. It looks really solid. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Gateway. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ed Jones' 2024 Synergy Modular scheme that we're going to see this weekend at Portland. Colors look alright in my opinion. Love the black, love the white. I think that Sam Hunt Racing did a very solid job. Looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Gateway International Raceway. Looks pretty solid, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Pocono Cup Race, as they have a title sponsor. It's going to be called the Great American Getaway 400. I think it's the first time the Great American Getaway is sponsoring a Cup Series race. We already know the USA Today sponsored New Hampshire. It's pretty solid to see this. Nonetheless, pretty solid title to see that the Great American Getaway will be sponsoring the Cup Series race at Pocono later this season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Gateway and Portland purses. Every time we have a Cup, Xfinity Series, and Truck Series race, Bob Pockets puts out the purse money for those events. And according to Bob, for the Cup race, it's $7,776,907. For the Xfinity race, it's $1,408,568. And for the Truck Series race, it's $752,252. Not a lot of money for the Truck Series. Xfinity could be a little higher considering that they're going to be out in the west up northwest, which is really far away from Charlotte. But the Cup purse money is very solid. I think it's decent purse money, at least for Cup, but for Xfinity trucks, it could definitely be a lot of better. Nonetheless, really sad to see the numbers could be a little higher. I do wish they had a little more money for this, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're unfortunately taking this episode to a sour note. As it was sadly announced on Wednesday that Jerry Gappens has sadly passed away at the age, I believe 63 years old. Jerry Gappens was a promoter at Charlotte Motor Speedway and was the general manager at Eldora Speedway. He had a major impact on the racetrack and did a lot of great things for Eldora. My thoughts and condolences do go out to the Gappens family currently at the moment, everybody that was really close to him. Thinking about the Gappens family at the moment, and really sad news and tragic news overall, to be perfectly honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tristan Vautier. As it was announced on Wednesday that Tristan Vautier is making his return to IndyCar as he's going to drive the 51 for Dale Coyne Racing this weekend on the streets of Detroit. I don't remember the last time a Tristan Vautier raced in IndyCar, maybe like 2015 or 2016. It has been a very long time. I think he's been currently competing in the World Endurance Championship in recent years. This is what I like about Dale Coyne Racing. They'll just get random drivers and give them a chance and opportunities. You'll get people like Luca Giotto coming out of retirement. You'll get people, of course, like Colin Braun getting a chance and opportunity. And now Tristan Vautier is going to get the chance and opportunity, which I believe that Tristan has competed with this team in the past, if I remember correctly. Really great opportunity for Tristan. It's pretty cool to see that he's getting the chance and opportunity to make an IndyCar return. I really hope he can do a really good job with Dale Coyne Racing this weekend at Detroit. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Thomas Annuenzietta. As it was announced yesterday that Thomas Annuenzietta will make his Xfinity Series debut at Sonoma next weekend, driving the 4-car for JD Motorsports. Thomas Annuenzietta has basically driven in the, I think, Mazda MX-5 Cup Series in the past, and also currently competes in the Trans Am Series, where I think he's done a really good job over there. Also competed in the ARCA race at Daytona earlier this year, and finished runner-up to Gus Dean. I think Thomas is a very, very talented driver, and I think he's going to do a very solid and great job with this organization. And I really hope he can make the best of it, because I think he's definitely got the talent to back it up, and I think he could have a very, very solid run. It's a great opportunity. Glad to see he's getting a chance and opportunity to work with this team this weekend. I think he will do a very good job this weekend. And not this weekend, next weekend at Sonoma Raceway. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Green. As it was announced yesterday that Austin Green will drive the 32 for Jordan Anderson Racing this weekend at Portland. Austin Green has made, I believe, 2 starts so far in 2024. Actually had a very solid run, I believe, the last time he ran at COTA, where I believe he finished inside the top 15. And I do believe he's got a few other starts scheduled with Jordan Anderson Racing this season. It's a fantastic opportunity. This 32 car has been struggling a little bit with the owner's points, but I do believe that Austin Green will have a really good chance to make the field, and I think he will be extremely competitive. It's a great opportunity, and glad to see he'll have the chance and opportunity to work at Portland with Jordan Anderson Racing and the 32 organization. And now we're going ahead jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Logan Bearden. As it was officially announced yesterday that Logan Bearden will drive a 07 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Portland. Logan Bearden, I believe, has made 2 starts so far this season with SS Greenlight Racing and has been very competitive. I remember that race in Portland where he actually spun out and came back to finish, I believe, inside the top 20. I think that Logan Bearden is a very solid road racer. He's made a couple starts in AM racing in the truck series in the past, and I do believe that Logan Bearden could have a very strong performance this weekend at Portland with SS Greenlight Racing. I think he's going to have a good opportunity here, and his 07 cars had some decent runs, and we've put the right driver behind the wheel. It tends to do very good. I think Logan Bearden will have a great chance and opportunity, and I think he'll do a really awesome and great job this weekend at Portland International Raceway. And now we're going ahead jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Andre Castro. As it was announced yesterday morning that Andre Castro will drive the 14 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Portland. Jesse Wuji Motorsports is also involved as Andre Castro is working with the Jesse Wuji Motorsports organization. For those who do not know who Andre Castro is, Andre Castro competed in the NASCAR Euro Series for about a year or so and also made his debut at Chicago Street Course with that team and was actually pretty impressive and ran, I believe, in the top 20 the whole entire race. I think that Andre Castro is a very solid road course racer, and I do expect that he is going to do a very solid and great job with this team and organization. I think he's going to have some good pace and speed, and I think he's going to do a very excellent job with them this weekend. Looking forward to seeing him get the chance and opportunity to drive with SS Greenlight at Portland. I really hope he can make the best of it because I think he's got the talent to back it up, and I think he could do a very, very good job this weekend at Portland International Raceway. And now we're going ahead jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Helio Castroneves. As it was shockingly announced on Wednesday evening that Helio Castroneves will be taking over to 66 for Meyer-Shank Racing this weekend at Detroit, and I believe the next race, which is next weekend at Road America. This is definitely a major shock because guess who's driven the 66 car all year? Tom Blomqvist. A lot of people feel like the first lap incident, that happened in the Indy 500 where Tom Blomqvist made a major mistake where he crashed into the outside wall and took out Marcus Ericsson and Pietro Fittipaldi is the big reason. I think there's another big reason. There's a lot of rumors and rumors that Meyer-Shank Racing is bringing back their IMSA program next year. So that might be a huge reason why they are benching Tom, because Tom is so committed currently to racing with Meyer-Shank Racing at this particular moment. I feel bad for Tom because he just made a little mistake. We've seen drivers make those kind of mistakes before, but I guess they're upset with how everything happened. I feel bad for Tom. I really hope he can race again in IndyCar, but he has struggled, and I think they're trying to keep the Leaders Circle money in. Also, Helio Castroneves has just not done a fantastic and great job in the last few years on the road courses, so this is definitely a little bit of a shock for sure. I do feel bad for Tom. I really would get to see him back at some point this year. Maybe they should have just had Helio not for the street courses, but basically for the ovals, because Helio's a good oval racer at this point. I just don't know if I agree with replacing Tom when we're going to 2 very good races where I think he could turn it around this season. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Luke Fenhaus. As it was officially confirmed yesterday or Wednesday that Luke Fenhaus will make his Truck Series debut tomorrow afternoon at Gateway International Raceway, driving number 66 for ThorSport Racing. Luke Fenhaus, for those who do not know, currently competes, I believe, part-time with Pinnacle Racing Group and has been racing in the Midwest scene over the course of the last couple of years. I think he's got a win or two in ARCA competition, and what's really crazy is I think Luke's only like 18 or 19 years old, so he's still a very relatively young driver. I think Luke Fenhaus is going to have a really solid debut. I think he's definitely going to do better what Connor Jones has done in that truck, considering that Connor Jones really has done nothing and accomplished anything. No disrespect to him, but it's the truth. I think Luke, because he's got a couple starts, I think, scheduled. I think Milwaukee's on his schedule as well. So I think he's going to do a very solid and great job with this team and organization. I think he's got the talent to back it up, and I think he'll do a very good job. I think he's got a great chance for a top 10, and I think he will be extremely fast and extremely competitive. I'm looking forward to seeing him get the chance and opportunity because I think that he'll do a very excellent and great job with ThorSport Racing this weekend at Gateway. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Coca-Cola 600 TV ratings. They unfortunately are not the greatest. According to Adam Stern, Fox got 3.103 million viewers for Sunday's rain-shortened Coca-Cola 600. That is down, I think, about 10 or 15% from last year's, which I think had 3.399 million, which remember that race was rain delayed to Monday. There are a couple reasons why, unfortunately, the race was rain delayed, well, not rain delayed, but unfortunately down in the ratings. Number one, Kyle Larson was not there for basically the whole entire race. Kyle Larson is one of the biggest superstars. Now, why was he not there? Well, remember, he, of course, is competing in this year's Indianapolis 500. And unfortunately, I think that played a major key factor in a role to the ratings being down for the event. The other big reason, there was about a 2.5 to 3 hour rain delay after the race concluded or went before the race ended, and a lot of people just tuned out and they were waiting to get back on TV. Then NASCAR unfortunately called it. It also doesn't help the fact that the Midwest was hit by a major storm. And a lot of people in the Midwest, like where I live, were unfortunately affected by a lot of coverage of the weather that was hitting in the Midwest. I think Chicago got hit, which is a pretty big market. And I also believe that there were a couple other big areas that were hit by the weather storm. It is very unfortunate to see that the ratings are down, but when you look at the outside circumstances, it really isn't shocking or surprising, sadly. So I'm disappointed by the Coke 600 TV ratings, but really I'm not shocked by them considering the circumstances of what unfortunately ended up happening. It sucks to see the ratings down, but once again, I'm not majorly shocked and surprised when there's a lot of big factors that really came into play in this situation. Not shocked or surprised to see it, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cam Waters. As Cam Waters confirmed on Wednesday evening that he will be returning to Supercars with Tickford Racing in 2025. There have been some speculation with Cam Waters making a couple Truck Series starts and, of course, making his Cup Series debut next weekend with RFK Racing. There had been a ton of speculation that Cam Waters was potentially going to come over to NASCAR full-time in 2025, especially went on to win another race because we've seen Shane Van Gisbergen come over, and he's currently running full-time in Xfinity, and he's hoping to run full-time in the Cup Series next year with Trackhouse Racing. I think a lot of people in the supercars world are very, very concerned that there are going to be a lot of drivers from that series coming over and racing in NASCAR. Remember, Will Brown is also making his Cup Series debut next week with Richard Childers Racing of Mobile X, working with them in a pretty huge way. I think that Cam Waters is making the right decision. I think eventually he is going to come over to NASCAR on a full-time basis. I just think it's going to happen in the next couple of years. I think 2026 is a possibility. We know that RFK Racing is interested in expanding their program, but they do need $30 million, and I think that's probably a huge reason why this is taking place. I really hope that he does in the future come over and race in NASCAR on a full-time basis, but he's got the chance and opportunity to work with another great organization. I know Ford's been kind of struggling this season, but I certainly do believe that if you've got a chance to run with a great team in supercars, you take that chance and you stay with them. So I'm glad to see he's sticking around in supercars this year. I think he'll do a very, very solid and a really good job with the team in 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Parker Retzlaff. As it was officially announced yesterday afternoon that Parker Retzlaff will make his Cup Series debut later this year at Daytona International Speedway, driving the number 62 for Beard Motorsports. There's been rumors and speculation that Parker was looking to make his Cup Series debut, but we all kind of thought it was going to be with Rodney Childers Racing. There was a car in the RCR shop. But then I do remember that Beard Motorsports does, I believe, have an alliance with Rodney Childers Racing. Also going back to Parker Retzlaff, I think Parker is an extremely talented driver, and he always gets the best out of equipment. I think a lot of his top fives have come as super speedways. I believe he finished in 4th at Daytona earlier this year behind Jordan Anderson, I believe Sheldon Creed or Chandler Smith, and then of course the guy who won the race, that being Austin Hill. I think Parker is going to have a solid chance and opportunity here. Beard Motorsports is a pretty good and solid organization, and they always do a very good job on these super speedways because they always put the effort to try to do well on these types of tracks. I think that Parker Retzlaff is going to do a very excellent job. And again, it's just a really awesome and great opportunity for him because he always gets the best out of equipment. He always does a very excellent job. And I'm really just excited and looking forward to see that Parker Retzlaff will get to make his Cup Series debut later this year at Daytona. He's a very talented and gifted driver. And I think if in the future we could see him with a team like RCR next year, especially if some big moves happen, I'm glad to see that he'll get the chance and opportunity to drive with Beard Motorsports and make his Cup debut at Daytona International Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rockingham Speedway. As it was reported by Bob Pockers yesterday in regards to questions about the future of Rockingham being added to the schedule. Bob Pockers says that Rockingham Speedway is not expected to be on the Cup schedule in 2025, though he says that things could change at a given moment and time. He does also say that the Cup Series schedule is expected to be released in the next couple of weeks. Now, the schedule was originally supposed to be out in the last couple weeks, and I heard they were looking to maybe release schedule as early as this week. However, there's a couple delays that are holding things up. I think they're having a hard time figuring out if we're going to be going to Montreal next year or if we're going to be going to Mexico. But going back to Rockingham Speedway, I think Rockingham Speedway absolutely deserves to be on the NASCAR schedule. The reason that we've heard Rockingham is possible is because Carson Nospart teased it on one of his streams that they were looking to go back to Rockingham for 2025. But we all do have to remember that Carson Nospart can sometimes be a little bit of a troll. So not everything that Carson Nospart says is exactly accurate or true. Trust me, I want to see Rockingham Speedway back on the schedule, and I think it needs to be on the Cup Series schedule. I think the racing would actually be really good because the one thing about the next-gen car is you do need multiple groups for the racing to be good. And I think that this track provides multiple groups and multiple opportunities. So while I'm sad to see that it's not likely going to be on the Cup Series schedule in 2025, I think there is a chance it could come on in 2026. It needs to be on the schedule in the future. I really hope NASCAR is listening because I believe that this track would put on some excellent and fantastic and great racing. And I really hope they make the decision to go ahead and add it in 2025. Will they? I'm not entirely sure, but I really hope they make the decision to go ahead and add it to the Cup Series schedule in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rodney Childers. Now, Rodney Childers was on a Dale Jr. Download Reload with Carla Gabehart and a couple other people, and Rodney Childers was asked about his future in NASCAR. And Rodney Childers, and we talk about him because Rodney Childers is one of the biggest highly coveted free agents. I think if everybody at Stewart-Haas Racing, including the drivers, including people that work in the team, I think Rodney Childers is the mostly highly coveted individual at that organization. Rodney Childers won a ton of races so far, working with Kevin Harvick over the years. And I consider Rodney Childers to be one of the best crew chiefs in the business currently at the moment. And I think that Rodney Childers will likely go where Josh Berry goes. If you want my prediction, I think he'll end up at Farmer Motorsports next year with Josh Berry. I think it's a package deal, and Rodney Childers really likes working with Josh Berry. And he's actually going to be helping a lot in the transition of helping a lot of people find jobs for the 2025 season, which I find to be really, really awesome because Rodney Childers is a really good dude, and I think he's going to do a lot of great things to help people get on the move going into next year. I think he's an excellent ambassador for the sport, and I certainly do believe that Rodney Childers is going to do a great job helping people find jobs for the 2025 season. I think it needs to happen where he helps out, and I think he's going to be that person that can help in a big way get people moving for the 2025 years. So I really hope that he can find a job. I predict right now he's likely going to front row. We'll have to wait and see what decisions he makes for the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season, because I expect it to be in Cup next year. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch recently had a one-on-one with Bob Pockers, and one of the questions that Bob asked him about is Kyle Busch Motorsports. And Bob asked him if he's regretting selling KBM to be a little bit of a distraction currently at the moment of him struggling a little bit in the Cup Series this year. Kyle Busch says that he is not regretting selling KBM, his Truck Series program. Kyle Busch Motorsports won 100 races in the Craftsman Truck Series, but unfortunately last year they announced they'd be closing at the end of the year, and it of course was bought by Spire Motorsports. Spire Motorsports, look at the success they've had so far. Roger Kroof has a win, Nick Sanchez has 2 victories, and the 7 truck, which will be driven this weekend will be driven later this weekend by, I believe, Andres Perez de Laura, and also we'll talk about another driver that'll be driving that truck here later this year. Kyle Busch, I don't think, has any regrets to selling KBM. And you have to remember, KBM is still around in a very small light. It's still working, of course, with Brexton Busch, and we have seen a lot of success with that organization over the years. I remember a few years ago speculating in the future that KBM could join the Cup Series, but I think Kyle Busch, he wants to focus on winning a Cup Series title once again. And I think you look at Kyle Busch's age. Kyle Busch is now 39 years old. So he is getting a little bit older. But I do think that Kyle Busch still has the fire inside of him. And he wants to get back to being in that competitive light, which I think Kyle Busch certainly could get back into that competitive light in the future. I think he's extremely talented, one of the greatest NASCAR drivers of all time, and I think he deserves a chance and opportunity to be very, very successful. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see maybe could he bring it back. I don't think he's going to bring it back as of now. I'd love to see Kyle Busch bring back the organization in the future, but right now I just don't see Kyle Busch bringing back Kyle Busch Motorsports because I think he's focused on a lot of other things currently at this particular moment. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Clint Bowyer. As it was shockingly announced on Wednesday afternoon that Clint Bowyer is making his return to NASCAR as he'll drive the 7 for Spire Motorsports in the Truck Series in a couple weeks at Nashville Super Speedway. This is absolutely a shock. The last time that Clint Bowyer competed in NASCAR was in the Cup Series when he drove the 14 car for Stewart-Haas Racing. I actually looked up his stats from Nashville Super Speedway in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and his numbers in Xfinity are absolutely incredible. He has finished no worse than 5th in the 9 starts he's had in the Xfinity Series, and also got a winner, I believe, back in 2008 or 2007 or whenever he won at the racetrack. Clint is absolutely amazing at Nashville Super Speedway. Not only that, Clint Bowyer has won 3 Truck Series races, and also he's been very good at this track before. I think Clint Bowyer is going to have a very solid and great performance with Spire Motorsports because they're one of the best organizations. I talked about it just a second ago, but Spire Motorsports' performance has been extremely impressive throughout the 2024 season. And I think he's going to just do an excellent job with the team. He might be my pick for that weekend because you look at it, like I said, at the performance, and I think it's a very solid and great organization. So it's really cool to see this. It's phenomenal to see that Clint Bowyer is coming out of retirement to race once again. I think he's just going to do an excellent and fantastic job. And like I said, I'm looking forward to see Clint Bowyer have the chance and opportunity to make his return at Nashville Super Speedway. I think he's going to do a very excellent and great job with Spire. And also reunited with Brian Patty as well. It's another big thing to look at as Brian Patty is the crew chief. I think those two are going to gel very well together, and they're going to work together extremely well at Nashville Super Speedway. I think he's going to do really good with the team this year. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. As Stewart-Haas Racing put out a tweet on Wednesday afternoon talking about that they are still going to be committed throughout the rest of 2024. And they sent out a thank you message to all the fans for the support over the years and told fans to be respectful to the people that are doing the social media platforms. Obviously, it was sadly announced that Stewart-Haas Racing is going to be shutting down at the end of this year. It's unclear what's going to happen to the NASCAR Xfinity Series program, but apparently the highest bidder could pick that up. My guess most likely is going to be Front Row or maybe a team like RFK Racing, because we know there's been some rumors that RFK is a little bit interested to go back to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. But they're absolutely right with the message they sent to people. There are humans behind these accounts, and they are asking people to be extremely respectful to them because they've been respectful to people for many, many years. And I know that a lot of people are very upset with Tony and Gene for shutting down the program. But like I said, you have to remember that there's humans behind these accounts that are running these accounts. So I really hope people are respectful. I think SHR, for everything they've done, they've had a lot of accomplishments in the sport, and I think that they deserve the respect, and the people behind these accounts deserve the respect as well. So I really hope that people do show respect to the people that run these accounts. I hope they do because they deserve respect, and I really hope there is a lot of respect shown because they certainly deserve respect, because I don't want to see people get treated with crap, because I know that people have been sending really bad stuff to SHR with this announcement. I really hope that people show SHR a ton of respect going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the charter agreement. As it was reported by Bob Pockrass on Wednesday that the Cup teams got NASCAR's latest charter agreement proposal yesterday. And according to what Bob has reported, this new charter agreement proposal could go past 2031. One thing that was asked about, were permanent charters part of this proposal? According to Bob, has been told by people close to him, and sources have told him, permanent charters were not part of this new agreement proposal that was sent. This is not a shock. We've been hearing that they were likely going to be sent a new charter proposal, and it's very interesting to me that 2031 is the year. Now, there's been some very interesting key details to come out of this. Number one, like I said, the new charter agreement going past the current TV deal for next year, which goes through 2031. The other big key thing, a lot of these teams want permanent charters. Now, everybody, when it comes to this, is not going to be very, very happy. A lot of people feel like that the sport, and yes, some team owners, they're probably going to say that the sport is headed toward a much better direction. Well, you got people like Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan who are saying at the moment that they're not happy with the direction the sport is going. But Denny Hamlin's also built a new headquarters and a new shop, that being Airspeed, though they're not going to call that a shop. And you wouldn't be building Airspeed if you didn't feel confident about the future of the sport. One of the other big things, there's a lot of expectations that the new charter agreement is going to require teams to downsize to 3-car operations, except Hendrick Motorsports and JGR, because they will be grandfathered in. Now, probably in the future, they are going to be forced to downsize to 3-car operations. Now, obviously, this is a really, really big deal when you look at the charter agreement, because everybody wants this charter agreement to get done. If you want my personal honest prediction, I think a charter agreement is going to get finalized in the next few months. I think it's going to get announced probably in the next couple of weeks, to be honest. I think most teams are going to come to a table and agree. And if you don't agree to the charter rules, guess what? You're probably going to be sent off the table, and you're probably going to lose your opportunity to be in the next charter agreement. So we'll see when this does get finalized, but I do expect that they are going to officially finalize a charter agreement for 2025, which I think is going to go a lot longer than 2031. I think it will be announced in the not-so-distant future that a new charter agreement is going to be coming into place starting in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Josef Newgarden. Now, Josef Newgarden was interviewed by Bob Pockrass very recently, and he was asked about if he's ever interested in racing in NASCAR. Josef Newgarden just most recently won his second straight Indianapolis 500. Josef Newgarden spoke to Bob, and he says, yeah, he actually wants to do the double and make a one-off start in NASCAR. He wants to run the Indy 500 and the Coca-Cola 600 on the same day. He also said in here that he wants Kyle Larson to try the double once again. Kyle Larson obviously grew IndyCar in a major and huge way, and a lot of the competitors in IndyCar gained a ton of respect for Kyle Larson, even though I think many of the competitors in IndyCar already had a ton of respect for Kyle Larson before going into it. Now, speaking on Josef Newgarden doing the double, there are a lot of drivers, not just in the IndyCar world, but in the NASCAR world, that are also interested in doing the double. Scott McLaughlin is very interested. Ryan Blaney is interested, and Kyle Busch is also interested. I heard Chris Rice say on Door Bumper Clear, there's at least 3 drivers that are interested in doing the double in 2025. Now, all this is going to hinge on whether or not Kyle Larson is granted a waiver, which is going to be coming in just a next couple days. We're probably going to have a timetable decision on that coming relatively soon. But as for Joseph Newgarden racing in NASCAR, I want to see it. I have always wanted Joseph Newgarden to come over and race in the sport. I think it would really help NASCAR's growth in a pretty huge way. And we've been seeing more drivers from other forms coming in and racing in the next-gen era. Drivers like Shane Van Gisbergen, Cam Waters, Brody Kosecki with the Red Bull connection, among other things. And then you think about others like Kimi Räikkönen and, of course, Jenson Button. And now we've got the potential opportunity to see Joseph Newgarden be another name that could compete in this series. I'd love to see it happen. I really hope that Penske grants him. He's in a contract year currently, and they're working on a contract extension with him at this particular moment. I think it will happen in the future. I think Newgarden, because he's been wanting to do this now for about 5 or 6 years, I really hope that we get to see Joseph Newgarden race in NASCAR in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. Now, Chris Rice was on door bumper clear, and there's been a lot of talk and conversations about whether or not Kaulig Racing was looking to merge with Trackhouse Racing or sell their charters. Well, Chris Rice confirmed on Door Bumper Clear that he is not selling any charters, and they are planning to be a two-car operation more than likely in the 2025 season. They say that they are looking for partners for 2025, and they feel like they've not been doing a really great job in recent seasons. Kaulig Racing obviously has been struggling immensely in 2025, and they've made some pretty critical mistakes in recent years. They lost, of course, Justin Haley to Rick Ware Racing. Chandler Smith, who was a really good talent, went over back to the Toyota pipeline and went to Joe Gibbs Racing, could be a Cup next year of JGR. And then, of course, they moved AJ Allmendinger, who was their best driver ever, back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. When I think of Kaulig Racing, they need to do one or two options. I personally think they should sell a charter to Trackhouse Racing, but Trackhouse is expected to pick up a charter from Stewart-Haas Racing. So what do you do in this situation if you are Kaulig Racing? Well, you get the two best drivers you have for next year. Because I think that Trackhouse is going to be a three-car team and Zane Smith's going to be the one they choose. So I look at Kaulig, you have Shane Van Gisbergen, maybe in the 31 next year, and you have AJ Allmendinger in the 16. I think that would be a really strong lineup for them next year. I think SVG should be a Cup driver in 2025. And you form a major and technical alliance with Trackhouse Racing. You get Trackhouse to prepare your cars for you, so your cars are much quicker because Kaulig would get a lot faster. What they've done this year of having drivers like Ty Dillon and Derek Kraus throughout the year and other drivers, of course, like Shane Van Gisbergen, it really isn't working. You need two full-time drivers in your seat, and I think Allmendinger and SVG would be my two choices. Now, Daniel Hemrick does have sponsorship and funding with him, so this may hurt this possibility of happening. But if I was Kaulig Racing and we're looking to be a two-car team, you need to have two very talented drivers and put those two guys up, and I think your program will get a lot better. I think the road course program's been really good, but the rest of their program, and their Xfinity program too, is the other thing to look at too. I would say downsize the Xfinity program if you're going to be a two-car team in Cup, because 3 cars in Xfinity and 2 Cup cars, I don't think is sustainable long-term, in my opinion. We'll see what happens long-term for Kaulig, but right now at this moment, they're not planning to sell. And like I said, I truly do believe that Chris Rice is telling the truth. So I do believe that they are only going to be a 2-car team once again next year. I don't expect really anything to change. I think they'll once again be a 2-car operation in 2025. And personally, I think it should be SVG and Allmendinger if SVG does not go to Trackhouse Racing next season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill. Now, we've all been wondering what penalty Austin Hill was going to get after what he did at Charlotte Motor Speedway. Well, he actually did get a penalty. It was announced on Wednesday that Austin Hill has been fined $25,000 and has received a 25-point penalty, dropping him from first to, I believe, second or third in the standings. And the reason he was penalized because he intentionally wrecked Cole Custer. Now, it looked to me like, when I saw the replay, it looked like it might have been under green, but it also looked like it was under caution. The caution light came on about the time the wreck happened, so it's very borderline and very, very close. Personally, I don't think this is exactly the right situation. At least NASCAR did penalize him, and I'll give them props for actually penalizing Austin Hill. But I think that Austin Hill should have been suspended for intentionally wrecking Cole Custer. And here's why I think he should have been suspended for it. He wrecked Cole Custer into oncoming traffic. That was a very bad look on Austin Hill's part. And this is not the first time that Austin Hill has lost his temper on or off the racetrack. You go back 2 years ago when he got in a fight with Maya Snyder. You go back to last year of what happened at Martinsville. Austin Hill has a very short temper. I think he's got talent, don't get me wrong. The guy's won a lot of races in the Xfinity Series, of course, a lot of those being on super speedways. But Austin Hill has got a lot of talent. And we've suspended drivers for intentionally wrecking others. We didn't penalize Kyle Busch a couple weeks ago for having a North Wilkesboro, despite the fact he intentionally wrecked Ricky Stenhouse, so that was under green flag conditions. But we penalized one guy and don't penalize the other. Meanwhile, we gave Ricky Stenhouse Jr. a $75,000 fine for punching Kyle Busch. Now, yes, I know the Cup Series, you're going to get more expensive penalties than the Xfinity Series. And what I've seen is people are kind of compared to what happened with Noah Gragson and Sage Karambush. I don't think the caution was out until the spin happened. I'm pretty sure the caution was out. I could be wrong, but I think the yellow flag was out when Austin Hill dumped Cole Custer. I personally think on one race suspension should have been the thing. I know this is controversial, but again, I'm glad NASCAR at least took some action. But I think it either should have been a suspension or $50,000 fine. This is unacceptable, Austin Hill did, and I don't think that this is like a slap on the wrist for him. The guy's already got 2 wins this year, so it's not like it's going to take him out of playoff contention. I think one thing that would have clearly gotten the message for him is a suspension. Yes, it was a left hook, rear hook, not a right rear hook. If it was a right rear hook, I think he would have been suspended personally. But it was in oncoming traffic. So to me, I think this should have been a suspension. I know some will disagree, and that's fine. I understand your opinion. But I do believe that Austin Hill should have been suspended for his actions because I think what he did was completely classless and unacceptable. In my honest opinion, he should have been suspended for the wreck and the incident. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about NASCAR silly season. Now, we already talked about this a couple days ago, but Stewart-Haas Racing will be shutting down at the end of 2024. And we wonder what's going to happen to the drivers at Stewart-Haas Racing and other organizations. Where are the charters going to go for SHR? Well, according to Bob Pockers, we know that Front Row, they are expanding in 2025. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. But the other teams that are expected to pick up the charters from Stewart-Haas Racing are 2311 Racing and Trackhouse Racing. 2311 Racing is no secret, wants to eventually be maybe a 3 to 4 car organization. And while Denny has denied these claims, I expect 2311 Racing to be a 3-car organization. I think most likely it will end up being Corey Heim, who will end up getting that third 2311 Racing C. Remember, he's making another start at Nashville for 2311 Racing, which is second, a 3-start schedule for the 50 car. And also, you look at Corey Heim's talent. I think Eric Almirola and Chandler Smith are also options, and Sheldon Creed, maybe even Kurt Busch, who wants to come back. But I think that Corey Heim is most likely to take the seat. The other charter is expected to go to Trackhouse Racing. It's the third charter. Trackhouse, they want to expand to 3 to 4 cars next year, though they may not be able to expand to 4 because of the new clauses coming into play with the charter agreement. Trackhouse, I think, could also expand next year, and I think that Shane Smith will get the third option because Ross is under a long-term contract, and Daniel Suarez is close to signing an extension with Trackhouse Racing as we speak. Now, what happens to the drivers at the team MSHR? Well, I think we'll talk about some of those here with the Front Row expansion, but let's start with Chase Briscoe. Chase Briscoe is expected to go to the Wood Brothers next year. Many believe he's the favorite for the 21 car. Look, I know the 21 car has not been great in recent years, but I think a lot of that is unfortunately due to Harrison Burton. I think Harrison is a decent driver, but Harrison Burton is not a driver that's going to carry your equipment. He wasn't very good as last year at JGR, and he was not originally supposed to move up in 2022 with the Dex imaging money and stuff. So I think that Chase Briscoe more than likely takes the 21, and I think he takes that team to playoff contention. Let's go to that 4th charter. I think that 4th charter is going to go to RCR. Here's why. RFK, we know they're in the running for another charter, but Brad said he needs $30 million. He said if someone can start a GoFundMe, that would be great. JTG is interested in expanding as well, but I don't think that they are going to expand next year. We don't even know if who their partner is going to be for next year. Junior Motorsports, they're not expanding next year. They're not coming to Cup as of now. They're not buying one of the SHR charters. They could come in the future, but I don't know if it's going to happen next year. I think that other team is RCR, and here's why. Richard Childers Racing is a team that I've heard is interested in expanding for next season. If you want my prediction, I think this is where Noah Gragson goes. Noah Gragson is heavily connected with Bass Pro Shops, and Bass Pro Shops is a major sponsor of RCR. If Noah Gragson wants to go there, they're going to need to be a 3-car team. Austin Dillon just signed a multi-year extension with the organization starting for 2025. He's got a multi-year extension with the team, and Kyle Busch has told the media that he is not going anywhere next year. So I think that's where they'll need a 3rd charter. I think that's where Noah Gragson will end up next year. As there's some other notable things, Todd Gillen is expected to sign an extension with Front Row. Bubba Wallace, he is expected to sign a multi-year contract extension with 23XI Racing. They're very close to signing that extension at the moment. I think that's coming in the not-so-distant future. And there's some other teams that could make some moves this silly season that we don't know about. But I expect some of these drivers to move. We'll talk about some of the other drivers here in just a second. But right now, I think most likely you're going to see the drivers I mentioned in these respectful places for 2025. Noah Gragson could also go to Trackhouse, but I expect that Gragson will be at RCR in the 2025 season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. Now, one of the biggest talking points and discussions surrounding Kyle Larson is, should Kyle Larson be granted a NASCAR waiver? Now, why should he be granted a waiver? Well, let's talk about that in a second. But first, we now have official confirmation information that Hendrick Motorsports has officially filed a playoff waiver request for Kyle Larson. We do not know when that is going to be done, as there's no timetable on when that is going to be finalized for Kyle Larson. Now, personally, I think Kyle Larson should be granted a waiver. I really don't understand the discussion point on why Kyle Larson should not be granted a waiver. There's a lot of reasons why. Number one, Kyle Larson was promoting the sport, and he was trying to grow motorsports as a whole. If you deny Kyle Larson a waiver, no driver, at least on the NASCAR side, is ever going to do the double again. And also saying, the playoff requirements. Kyle Larson already has 2 wins this year, and he only dropped from 1st to 3rd in the points. 6 points below the lead. If you remove Kyle Larson from that, that is going to be a bad look for optics on the sport. And I feel like it's a bad look regardless at the moment because of the fact that they're taking so long to figure out if Kyle Larson should get a waiver. Which, like I said, Kyle Larson should absolutely 100% be getting a waiver. The fact it's not been announced is mind-boggling to me. I have to imagine they filed this a couple days ago and it wasn't filed on Thursday like Jennifer had initially reported. But here's another reason why I think he should get a waiver. We've given drivers waivers for injuries, which I think is justified. We've given drivers waivers for criminal situations. We've given waivers to drivers for not running the first 4 races. Looking at Matt Kenseth, for example. I think if you don't give Kyle Larson a waiver, you're going to be opening up a massive can of worms. If you're actively promoting the sport, like NASCAR has done working with Hendrick with the Garage 86 stuff, you should absolutely be getting a waiver. This shouldn't even be an argument at this point. And the fact that this debate has been going on for so long is absolutely mind-boggling to me. Kyle Larson got the Charlotte, folks. And you can say, the ratings didn't go up. Well, no crap. The ratings didn't go up because there was a 1 to 2 hour rain delay at the end of the event. People are obviously going to tune out of that. It was very late at night, and you couldn't move the race to FS1. And NASCAR called the race early. So it's on them for not getting a chance to get in there. He arrived to Charlotte, and they had the lighting delay come into play. So to me, if you don't grant Kyle Larson a waiver, it is a bad look on the sport. And if they do grant him a waiver, I know there's going to be some debate about it as well. I personally think we just get rid of the playoff system altogether and go to the top 16 drivers and then have them compete. And the waiver system is so stupid, it shouldn't be a thing. And I personally think the waiver system is frustrating too. I know it's frustrating, but personally, I don't think that should be the case. I think that the waiver system is frustrating, but I think Kyle Larson 1,100% should be granted a waiver by NASCAR, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Carl Edwards. Now, Carl Edwards was doing media availabilities yesterday for the first time since, I believe, Nashville last year. He talked about a lot of things because we know it was announced about a week or 2 ago that Carl Edwards will be inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And a lot of people asked if Carl Edwards was in the future going to return to NASCAR to race once again. Carl Edwards confirmed in the Zoom call with a lot of media reporters that he will not be returning to NASCAR once again and will not be racing as a driver. Now, he is open to doing TV in the future, which we'll speculate in just a second. There's a couple other very interesting key tidbits that Carl Edwards mentioned about the future. He says that 2016 was not the reason that he left the sport. There's a couple other reasons, and he feels like he should have communicated a lot better, and he plans to do that at the NASCAR Hall of Fame ceremony. First of all, I'm so very glad that Carl Edwards got inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. If you look at his numbers, 28 NASCAR Cup Series wins. I think over 70 wins across the board in all three series. Won the Busch Series championship back in 2007. Carl Edwards obviously left the sport at the end of 2016, and a lot of people speculated that the reason he left is because of the head injuries, among other things, in the crash that took place in 2016. Well, I don't think that is one of the reasons why Edwards left in the first place. I think Carl left the sport because of some of the decisions that the sport was making back in 2016 and 2017. There's always been this speculation about whether or not Carl Edwards was going to come into the sport and bring closure in. Well, I am not surprised to see that Carl, as of now, isn't interested in coming back in racing. Look, it has been nearly a decade since the last time Carl Edwards actually drove a NASCAR Cup car. He even said he doesn't even race for fun anymore. He hasn't paid attention to sport. He also said that Justin Marks and Denny Hamlin are doing a lot of great things for the sport currently at the moment, and apparently Justin had reached out to Carl about driving for his team back, I think, in 2019 or 2020. And we know that Denny has said that he's actually asked Carl to also race for his organization, but he did also confirm he's been doing some sim work in the sport. I would definitely love Carl to come back and race in the sport, but if Carl Edwards feels like he's accomplished a lot and has no regrets, I don't blame the guy for not wanting to come back and race. It's a very, very stressful racing series, and it can be very stressful to race 36 to 38 times a week, especially if you feel like you've accomplished enough in the sport. Now, going back to those TV comments, that is very interesting. I believe this is the first time we've heard Carl in the last 8 years basically that he's interested in doing TV. There's a couple TV networks that are very interested in running the show. We know that TNT and Amazon are going to be coming into the sport starting in the 2025 season. And we also know that NBC and Fox are looking for new affiliates next year and people working. We know that Dale Jr. is, of course, going to Amazon, and there's a lot of silly season broadcast moves that are expected to be announced in the not-so-distant future. I would love to see Carl Edwards potentially go to Amazon starting in 2025. Alan Bestwick maybe as well and Dale Jr. on the same broadcast, I personally think would feed a lot of families and make a lot of people very, very happy. It would be a very solid and great broadcast because Carl Edwards last year when he was in the broadcast booth at Darlington, it felt like he never left the sport. He still had a lot of knowledge and still knew what was going on behind the scenes. And it's just so crazy to see that Carl at least is coming out and basically says things have changed in the media. But for me, when I look at Carl Edwards, right, I would love to see him come back at least on the broadcast side of things. NBC's also got some places open. We are not even sure if any of the broadcasts are going to be back. Granted, Jimmy Johnson might be back for 2025 and Lee Diffie might be doing some commentary, but Rick Allen is probably going to be leaving NBC at the end of the year because he's of course going to be working with the CW at the end of the year for the Xfinity series going forward. Lee Diffie's taking over in the second half of the year, so Lee's probably going to be taking over NASCAR coverage because IndyCar's probably going to Fox next year. I'd love to see Carl Edwards come back or maybe work with one of these organizations as like a team ambassador. Work with Trackhouse Racing, help them grow a bit. Help out a team like 23LM Racing, help them grow a bit. Go back to Joe Gibbs Racing, help them a little bit, and grow. I definitely would love to see Carl Edwards make a comeback in some sort of capacity, not as a driver per se, but work as like a coach, an ambassador, help out the younger drivers, because I think Carl Edwards would be a great guy to go to really help and grow the sport. But working in the TV side of things would also be very, very fun. And I'd love one day for Dale Jr. to invite Carl Edwards out to the Dale Jr. Downs. I think Carl Edwards would be able to tell all. Again, it's a major congratulations to see that Carl Edwards is officially being inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I'm glad to see that he spoke to the media for the first time in a long time, and I'm glad to see that Carl is at least around and interested in certain things. We'll see if Carl Edwards gets back in the sport and the TV side of things, but he is not returning to NASCAR as a driver anytime soon and doesn't plan to get back behind the wheel as of now. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Front Row Motorsports. As it was officially confirmed on Wednesday afternoon that Front Row Motorsports has acquired a third charter for the 2025 season and will expand to a 3-car operation in 2025. Their Truck Series program is also going to be returning in the 2025 season. Now, the lineup is to be determined and to be announced at this current time. This is not a shock or surprise to see that Fenhaus Motorsports is expanding, considering the fact that they are basically expected to move into the Stewart-Haas Racing shop next season. With Stewart-Haas Racing closing, they are one of the organizations, along with Trackhouse in 2011, that has been expected to expand in 2025. You look at Fenhaus Motorsports Ascension. They've been a team that's been on the up and up over the course of the last couple of years. I remember when this team started as a start and park organization and struggled to even make races. Now, the two of the last 3 years, they've been able to make the playoffs, and they still can make the playoffs this year. While they've had a little bit of a down year in performance, you look at Todd Gillen, he's had a better year, and Michael McDowell has had some solid performances in 2024. And now they're looking to be a 3-car team. Now let's talk about the truck program really quickly. I think there's a few drivers who could be in that 38 truck next year. Personally, I'd like to see Lane Riggs get one more year at the team. I know he has struggled immensely in 2025, but Lane, I think, has had a lot of bad luck, and I think he's a very talented driver, and I feel like the speed is really starting to show up with Lane. So I think he deserves another year with this organization. There's also, of course, some other drivers who could be in the running. Brett Moffitt. Brett Moffitt was rumored to be a potential candidate to take over this seat starting in 2025 when Zane Smith moved up the Cup, but I think he could be in the running as well. You've also got a driver like Matt DiBenedetto who could be in the running, but Matt's interested in staying with Viking Motorsports. And then you've got other drivers like Haley Deegan who could move back down to trucks next year as a candidate there. Now let's talk about the Cup program. Who could be going there in 2025? Well, Todd Gillen is one driver that we know for a fact is going to be back at Fenhaus Motorsports next season. Todd Gillen is expected to sign a multi-year agreement in the next couple of weeks, and he'll likely be there in 2025. So he's the first driver that we know is going to be with the team. He's been doing a really great job with Fenhaus and looks to be the leader starting next year. So who are the other two drivers? Well, there's a lot of potential candidates. Chase Briscoe is not one of those because Chase Briscoe is expected to go to the Wood Brothers in 2025. Noah Gragson is another option if he doesn't go to RCR, but I think because of the connection with Bass Pro Shops, I think Noah Gragson is also off the table for 2025. So you have a couple other options. You got a ton of options, maybe inside and outside the box. You've got Riley Herbst. Riley Herbst brings sponsorship and funding to the table and is driven for Fenhaus Motorsports in the past. So he could be a candidate for sure because of the funding and sponsorship he has. You've also got Cole Custer. Cole Custer is a name that's been mentioned for the 34 car behind the scenes. And with the Joe Custer and Cole Custer connection, it would make a ton of sense with the funding that he brings at this moment. Plus, Ford really likes Cole Custer a lot, so I'd imagine he's a front runner for the 34 seat. What about Josh Berry? Josh Berry and Rodney Childers work together very well. I could definitely see Josh Berry being a major candidate for this seat going into next year. Ryan Preece, I think, is not an option going into next season because Ryan Preece does not bring any sponsorship funding, and I think more than likely he's going back to the Modified Series or maybe going back to the Xfinity Series in the 2025 season. So you have a couple other options for Xfinity. Even Haley Deegan could be a possibility. She's got a little funding and sponsorship to the table, but to be fair, she's been struggling immensely this year, so I don't know if she would be an option right now. Could Matt DiBenedetto be an option? Matt DiBenedetto does have a little funding with Viking Motorsports. They're working really heavily at the moment, and he's been doing a good job in Xfinity for the most part this year, so I would be cool to see him move up the Cup next year. But here's what I think the lineup is going to be looking like for Front Row next year. I think the first driver, no, it certainly is Todd Gillen. Todd Gillen's been doing a great job with the team this year. I think he's going to be one of them. The second driver is Cole Custer. Cole Custer has been linked to that 34 car for the last few months. I think he's going to the 34 next year. He's got sponsorship with him. Of course, they're going to be moving in SHR shop. I think that Gene will be involved in some sort of capacity with that next year. So I think that Cole Custer goes there. He's got the funding with him. He's been rumored to be going there. I think Loves is also going to stick around with Front Row. So that's going to help on the sponsorship front. I think that last right comes down between Riley Herbst and Josh Berry. And if I had to pick between Riley Herbst and Josh Berry, I'm going with Josh Berry. Josh Berry, in my opinion, is a much better driver than Riley Herbst. No disrespect to Riley. And Josh and that Ford team are really starting to gel. Josh Berry has done so good recently that he's actually up to 19th in points. And while he's like 80 points below the cutoff line, I feel like that Ford team is starting to get better. And I think that Josh Berry and Rodney Childers are going to go together to the Cup Series in 2025 again with Front Row. I think that Josh Berry and Cole Custer are going to be the two drivers that end up joining Todd Gillen. I'm excited for Front Row's future. I'm glad to see that they officially are expanding in the 2025 season because, like I mentioned already, I think Front Row's a team that's got a ton of potential going forward, and I think this is an absolutely amazing and great move for the sport to see a team like Front Row officially expanding next year. Congratulations to them. It'll be a 3-car team. There's going to be a lot of big silly season moves happening soon and driver announcements coming in the not-so-distant future. So, that is going to be today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. Who do you think joins Front Row in 2025? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And do you think Carl Edwards will ever return to NASCAR? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, more likely, I'm going to have a paint scheme video looking at all the paint schemes for this week in a Gateway. Tomorrow on the channel, we're also going to have, of course, the Truck Series race view, hopefully for Gateway. We'll also have the qualifying if it ends up happening. The weather doesn't look great. And we'll also have reactions to Portland and an SVG video. Got a ton of great content dropping. Also, remember, I will be at Gateway this weekend. So if you see me at Gateway on Sunday, make sure to stop by and say hello. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.